Money is supposed to have rules. Governments create it, banks move it, and regulators watch it. At least, that's the system we're told exists. But in reality, money often moves in ways that governments cannot fully control, especially when it crosses borders. And in the last decade, a new financial system appeared. One that doesn't rely on banks at all, cryptocurrency, a network where money can move instantly across the planet, without borders, without permission, and sometimes without identities. For many people, crypto represents freedom. For others, it represents opportunity. And for investigators, it has become something else entirely, a new battlefield in global finance. Because when money moves through anonymous digital wallets instead of banks, tracking it becomes extremely difficult. And that difficulty has created a new type of underground financial system, one that governments around the world are still struggling to control. But recently, investigators uncovered something unusual, something that didn't just involve anonymous crypto wallets or hidden transactions. Instead, it involved an entire company, a cryptocurrency exchange, a company that appeared legitimate on the surface. It had a corporate structure, it had websites, it had executives, and most importantly, it had a CEO. At least, that's what it looked like. But according to an international investigation, this company was allegedly helping move enormous amounts of money connected to networks in Iran. Not millions, billions. And the deeper investigators looked, the stranger the story became. Because when they started examining the company's leadership, something didn't make sense. The CEO, the public face of the company, had a profile online. There were videos, there were professional photos, there were corporate documents, everything that a legitimate technology executive would normally have. But investigators began noticing inconsistencies, small ones at first. A missing background detail here, an unclear career history there. And when journalists and analysts dug deeper, they discovered something shocking. The CEO might not actually exist. The images appeared to be constructed from stock media. The biography couldn't be verified. And the digital footprint behind this supposed executive was almost completely artificial. In other words, the person running a billion-dollar financial operation might have been entirely fictional. But the company itself was very real, and the money moving through it was very real. According to investigative reporting, 2 cryptocurrency exchanges registered in the United Kingdom allegedly processed around $1 billion in transactions connected to Iranian networks. The investigation was conducted by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, known as OCCRP, an international network of investigative journalists specializing in corruption and financial crime. Their analysis traced hundreds of cryptocurrency wallets connected to these exchanges, and many of those wallets were linked to financial activity associated with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC is one of the most powerful organizations inside Iran. It controls major parts of the country's military, intelligence operations, and large sections of its economy. But because of international sanctions placed on Iran over the years, moving money internationally has become extremely difficult for organizations connected to the Iranian state. Sanctions restrict access to the global banking system. Banks are required to block certain transactions. Financial institutions must report suspicious transfers. So, if money can't easily move through banks, where does it go? Increasingly, investigators say the answer is cryptocurrency. Crypto networks allow transactions to move across borders without relying on traditional banking systems. No central authority approves them. No bank employee reviews them. Instead, transactions are verified by decentralized blockchain networks, which means that if someone wants to move money internationally while avoiding sanctions, cryptocurrency can become a powerful tool. And according to investigators, that may be exactly what was happening here. The exchanges involved allegedly processed massive volumes of cryptocurrency transactions linked to networks operating in Iran. But the deeper journalists investigated the companies behind those exchanges, the more mysterious things became. Corporate structures appeared unusually opaque. Ownership chains led through multiple jurisdictions. And the leadership of the companies, the people supposedly running them, were almost impossible to verify. Then came the most disturbing discovery of all. The CEO at the center of the operation, the executive whose name appeared on company documents, appeared to have no real history, no verifiable past, no confirmed identity. It was as if the person had been created specifically to give the company a public face, a mask. And behind that mask, investigators believe there may have been powerful individuals operating in the shadows. But who exactly was behind the system? And how did a network of cryptocurrency exchanges allegedly move nearly $1 billion while appearing to be run by someone who may not even exist? To answer that question, investigators had to follow the money, and what they discovered next would lead them to one of the most controversial financial figures connected to Iran in the last decade. A man accused of moving billions of dollars through global financial networks. A man whose story already included corruption accusations, oil deals, and international sanctions. And according to investigators, his shadow may have appeared once again, this time inside the world of cryptocurrency. But to understand how this network really worked, we first need to understand how investigators were able to uncover it in the first place. Because in the world of cryptocurrency, money doesn't disappear. It leaves a trail, a digital trail, one that analysts can follow across the blockchain. And that trail would eventually reveal hundreds of connected wallets, massive flows of money, and a financial network far larger than anyone initially expected. If someone wanted to hide money 20 years ago, they would need offshore banks, secret accounts, shell companies, paper trails carefully hidden across different countries. But cryptocurrency changed that system completely. Because in crypto, transactions don't disappear. They are permanently recorded on something called the blockchain, a public ledger that anyone in the world can analyze. Every transaction, every wallet, every movement of money, recorded forever. At first glance, this seems anonymous. Wallets are just strings of letters and numbers. No names, no addresses, no identities. But investigators have learned something important about blockchain. If you follow the transactions long enough, patterns begin to appear. Wallets connect to other wallets. Networks form. And eventually, entire financial ecosystems can be mapped out. That is exactly what investigators began doing in this case. Journalists working with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project began analyzing transaction data connected to the cryptocurrency exchanges under investigation. They started tracing wallet addresses, mapping transfers, following the digital trail across thousands of transactions. And slowly, a pattern began to emerge. According to reporting cited in multiple investigations, analysts identified hundreds of cryptocurrency wallets connected to the network. Some reports mention at least 187 wallets linked to financial activity associated with Iranian networks. And these wallets were not moving small amounts of money. They were processing enormous volumes, large transfers, repeated transactions, millions of dollars moving through the system at a time. The exchanges at the center of the investigation appeared to be acting as financial gateways, places where cryptocurrency could enter the system, move through layers of wallets, and then exit somewhere else in the world. To an outside observer, these transactions look like normal crypto trading activity. But when investigators mapped the entire network together, the scale became clear. Over time, the total volume of transactions allegedly connected to the exchanges reached close to $1 billion. A massive financial flow moving quietly through the global crypto system. But where was this money actually going? And who was controlling the network? To answer that, investigators started examining the companies behind the exchanges themselves. And this is where things became even more unusual. On paper, the companies appeared to be registered in the United Kingdom. They had corporate filings, business addresses, formal documentation. But when journalists began investigating these details, many of them led nowhere. Some listed offices appeared to be empty. Others were shared addresses used by dozens of unrelated companies. In some cases, attempts to contact company representatives produced no response. It was as if the companies existed legally, but not physically. And then there was the question of leadership, because every company has executives, managers, directors, people responsible for operations. But as investigators tried to verify the identities of these executives, the trail became increasingly unclear. The supposed CEO, the person whose name appeared publicly, remained almost impossible to confirm. And that raised a new question. If the leadership was unclear, and the companies themselves appeared opaque, who was actually running the system? To find possible answers, investigators began looking at historical connections in Iran's financial networks. And one name kept appearing: Babak Zanjani. Zanjani is a controversial Iranian businessman who became internationally known during previous investigations into sanctions evasion. During the early 2010s, Zanjani was accused of helping move billions of dollars from Iranian oil sales through complex international financial networks. According to prosecutors, these networks used shell companies, foreign banks, and complicated financial structures to move money despite international sanctions. At the time, the case became one of the largest corruption scandals in Iran's history. Zanjani was eventually arrested by Iranian authorities and accused of embezzling billions of dollars connected to oil revenues. His case involved missing funds, secret financial networks, and international investigations. But the world of global finance changes quickly, and in the years since that scandal, a new financial tool has become far more powerful than offshore banks ever were: cryptocurrency. Unlike traditional banks, crypto exchanges can operate across borders almost instantly. They can serve users from multiple countries, and in some cases, they can process enormous financial flows without the same regulatory oversight as traditional financial institutions, which makes them extremely attractive to anyone trying to move money internationally while avoiding sanctions. Investigators studying the crypto exchanges connected to this case began noticing patterns that looked familiar: complex ownership structures, opaque leadership, and financial flows moving through networks of wallets before reaching their final destinations. All classic techniques used in money laundering systems, but now operating inside the world of cryptocurrency. And this raises a much larger question. If one network was allegedly able to move close to $1 billion through cryptocurrency exchanges, how many others might exist? Because the reality is that cryptocurrency has created an entirely new financial landscape, one where transactions move globally in seconds, where companies can exist mostly online, and where identities can sometimes be fabricated. Which brings us back to the beginning of the story: the mysterious CEO, the executive whose identity may have been constructed using stock media and fabricated information. If the leader of the company was potentially fictional, then the entire operation may have been designed to hide the real people behind it. And if that's true, then the $1 billion that investigators traced may only be part of a much larger system. A system designed to move money quietly across borders, while remaining almost invisible to the traditional financial world. But the story doesn't end there, because when investigators and analysts continued following the blockchain data, they discovered something else. Something that suggests this network may not have been isolated at all. Instead, it may have been part of a growing global trend. A trend where countries under heavy sanctions are increasingly turning to cryptocurrency to bypass the financial restrictions imposed by the international banking system. And that raises a question that governments around the world are now trying to answer. If cryptocurrency can be used to move billions outside the control of banks, what happens to the system of global financial sanctions? And more importantly, is this just the beginning? By the time investigators finished mapping the crypto transactions, the picture had become far more complicated than anyone expected. This wasn't just about one exchange or one fake executive. The money was moving through a much larger system, a system that investigators believe stretched across multiple countries. And to understand why that system exists, we have to go back to a specific moment in history. The year was 2012. The United States and the European Union introduced some of the most severe financial sanctions ever imposed on Iran. These sanctions targeted Iran's banking system and its oil industry. Major Iranian banks were disconnected from the international payment system known as SWIFT, the network used by banks around the world to transfer money between countries. Without SWIFT access, Iran suddenly faced a massive problem. It could still sell oil, but getting paid for that oil became extremely difficult. Traditional bank transfers were blocked, international payments were monitored, and companies that helped Iran bypass sanctions risked severe penalties. So, alternative systems began appearing. One of the most famous examples involved a complex network of gold trading. Investigators later discovered that billions of dollars worth of Iranian oil payments had been converted into gold and physically transported through countries like Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. The scheme eventually led to a major corruption scandal involving Reza Zarrab, a Turkish-Iranian gold trader who was later arrested in the United States in 2016. But that system relied on physical commodities: gold shipments, bank intermediaries, human networks. Cryptocurrency changed everything. Instead of shipping gold across borders, money could now move instantly through digital wallets. And those wallets could be controlled from anywhere in the world. This is why investigators believe cryptocurrency is becoming an increasingly important tool in sanctions evasion. And Iran is not the only country experimenting with it. In 2022, blockchain analysis firm Chainalysis reported that North Korean hacking groups had stolen hundreds of millions of dollars in cryptocurrency. One of the most famous incidents involved the Ronin network hack, where attackers stole more than $600 million in crypto assets. According to US authorities, the attack was linked to a North Korean state-sponsored hacking group known as Lazarus Group. The stolen funds were then laundered through complex crypto transactions across multiple exchanges. A digital version of money laundering. Russia has also explored ways to use cryptocurrency in response to Western sanctions imposed after the invasion of Ukraine. Russian officials have publicly discussed the possibility of using crypto for international payments. And in some regions, crypto mining operations have become a way to generate digital assets that can later be used globally. All of this points to a much larger shift. Sanctions used to rely heavily on controlling the global banking system. If a country could be cut off from international banks, its ability to move money across borders would collapse. But cryptocurrency has introduced a parallel financial system, one that operates partially outside the traditional banking infrastructure, and that system is still evolving. Which brings us back to the mysterious crypto exchanges investigators were studying. The companies allegedly moving nearly $1 billion. The ones registered in the United Kingdom. The ones with leadership that appeared impossible to verify. Because if the investigation is correct, these exchanges may represent something new. Not just a tool used by criminals, but part of a broader geopolitical strategy. A strategy where financial restrictions are bypassed using decentralized technology. And that raises serious concerns for governments trying to enforce international sanctions. Because the effectiveness of sanctions depends on controlling financial flows. But what happens when those financial flows move through systems that governments don't fully control? That question is becoming increasingly important. In Washington, in Brussels, in London, and in financial intelligence agencies around the world, regulators are now paying much closer attention to cryptocurrency exchanges. New regulations are being proposed. Some countries are requiring stricter identity verification. Others are increasing surveillance of blockchain transactions. But the reality is that technology often moves faster than regulation. New exchanges appear, new wallets are created, new systems emerge. And somewhere inside that constantly evolving digital ecosystem, billions of dollars continue to move every day. Some of it legitimate, some of it illegal, and some of it operating in a gray area that investigators are only beginning to understand. Which leaves us with one final question. If investigators were able to uncover one network that allegedly moved nearly $1 billion, how many others might still be operating undetected? How many financial systems exist behind anonymous wallets and digital transactions? And how many of them are quietly reshaping the way money moves around the world? Because in the age of cryptocurrency, the most powerful financial networks may not be the ones we can see. They may be the ones hidden behind algorithms, wallet addresses, and identities that don't even exist.